Before I start, yeah, here it is, the recording is here. So, first of all, before I start, let me just express my gratitude and say that it's a great pleasure and high honor to be invited by Let Her In to talk about this very interesting and very contemporary topic, which can have many different appearances and instances for the development of diverse initiatives and projects for the future, because it is going to be really kind of an umbrella theme which we can look into and try to explore and understand better. As already said by Maya, we are going to discuss nature and we are going to discuss sustainable future creation, whatever that could mean. So let me start without any further ado. The first thing that I would like to expose you to is the world, the 21st century we are currently living in. And although we are 22 years ahead of starting this millennium, and it's not just the year 2000, but 2021, it is still very interesting to observe how people look into different problems and deal with different issues. In general, we are facing three types of problems. Simple problems, such as a flat tire. It's not nice, but we know how to deal with it immediately. Or we can absolutely know and understand whom we can call to deal with it. There are complicated problems. For example, building the tallest building ever. Then we need experts. And the moment we have the experts and they know the solution, we can copy paste this solution as many times as need be. We know it very well in some of the projects we develop. The moment we have a very good way of describing our framework for dissemination, although it may differ per project, yet it can be taken and used as something developed by professionals. But there is a third type of problems, and this is the third type that we are discussing today, complex problems. These are problems such as climate change, energy transition, sustainable development goals, refugees. We don't have one solution. We have many different contextual solutions which work only for the given time and place. We cannot copy paste them. And this is exactly what currently the whole European system around all these different project schemes is very much busy with. So if you would look into this slide now that you have in front of you, you see a small picture in the middle. And it may be interesting for you, without even telling me, to look carefully in it and tell me, do you see a young lady? Or do you see an old lady? Or do you maybe see both? Because actually they both are represented into this picture. And that is how the world is built up as well, as it is in any different area that we may explore. There are always two complementary views, at least two, but two main ones, that we need to learn how to bring together. The same is as the world in the 21st century. We have this old view of everything being like a machine. In the Industrial Revolution, everybody spoke of a logic that you have to follow steps from 1 to 10, and at 10 you are successful, certainly. But the logic of the 21st century has also brought, because of technology, because of connectivity, because of globalization, hardly any high costs for transportation, that everything, as just Olena said in the beginning, is connected to everything else. Everything we do, every little action we do, has a consequence for everything we experience. Look at this slide and see the flock of birds. Do you see them all flying? Do you detect the leader? Can you tell which are the rules they follow to fly in the way they do? You can't, but they have their rules. And these specific rules, these patterns, are something for us to explore when we discuss nature and the way the European Union wants us to look into how we work on projects which would aim at sustainability, sustainable future creation, well-being economy, circular economy, or nature is really being a partner equal to us humans. Having said that, it is important to always start with a small definition. We need to create a common understanding at the end of the day of what is nature. And yes, every living plant and animal, flora and fauna, geological process such as a hurricane or an earthquake, weather, we just heard about the rain in Reus, or the sunshine we had here in the Netherlands, which is also very strange, all of that, such as also matter and energy, is nature. Nature, although, is not only that. Nature refers as well to every natural element we do not know of, but it exists in the wilderness. And because of its existence, the sustainability of the different processes on Earth can function as they have to function. We all witnessed, and we might be a bit tired of mentioning it again, but when talking about nature, it's worth it. We all witnessed the pandemic. The pandemic proved us to be wrong when saying that when something happens elsewhere, as far as that elsewhere could be, cannot have a direct impact on us. And having direct impact on us can have direct impact also on any natural element we may think of. And as a result, you saw that suddenly, in everything we are currently reading, all pieces of news, all media, whether social or the usual old-fashioned media we are used to, nature starts to be a term mentioned on a daily basis, as different statistics shows, more than 5 million times. Can you imagine? So again, no wonder that suddenly, of course, not very sudden, but yet they are a little bit more reactive than proactive, certain committees and authorities also decided to embed it into their policy documents and start looking for answers on how do we cope? How do we educate people to make nature also a member of the phenomenon for our living society? And of course, when talking that about making nature becoming an equal part of our society, we cannot avoid talking about what kind of rights then does nature have to have. And the first and foremost is important to and relevant to also tackle is to really think about creating this balance. A balance of what we as humans can do good for nature and what it can do good to us. About nature and its positive impact on us as humankind, we know enough. But about us and the positive impact of humankind on nature, there is a lot still to be said. And since all we know already, all ecosystems on our planet are deeply intertwined, we all require a different holistic view on that. And everything that will come for the future, especially these different documents that also such an incredible association as Let Her In has in its objectives, we have to tackle and see what could we do in order for making this topic a bit more visible and to work it out in diverse projects which could make a different meaning and create awareness, raise awareness, create understanding, and educate people to do things differently. I'm not going to go into these models in depth because, of course, you will be provided with the slides and the recording afterwards. But what I would like you to visualize a little bit for yourselves, because it might be very abstract about this nature and all its rights, is to look into these two icebergs. What do you see on your left-hand side? You see the current view of how we treat nature now, at this very special moment. We are degenerating, deconstructing, in sort of destructing nature with everything that we have done. And as a result, we experience climate crisis, alienation, inequality and poverty, pandemics, you name it. But if we would view the right-hand side of the iceberg, the other iceberg, then we see what nature actually brings to us by means of all these deficits or these disasters we may think of as the pandemic, as the climate crisis. Nature is fighting for a balance. It asks from us to change towards thinking about thriving ecosystems and not alienation, towards thinking about pandemic resilience and creating this immunity within humankind that could be resistant to whatever kind of a virus comes across, to greater health, well-being, and connection. So this is where nature's rights can come in force, and you could be the organizations which could enforce that in any of these different themes on the tip of the iceberg on the right-hand side. Basically saying we need to act with a whole systems approach. The current sustainability model that you may find in almost every UU project document so far tackles the three aspects: nature, people, and economy, whereby nature is as though it is a separate player which is not already part of the people and economy, but it is. So the rights of nature model really pinpoint this whole holistic picture of nature being embedded in everything we do, in the way the planet works, in the way we interact as humans in all these different constructs of organizations, in the way economy is generating value. So what is important here to say is that most of the organizations have oriented themselves in their businesses towards profit, and we are moving towards a society which orients itself towards purpose. By saying that, I don't mean that we need to neglect the monetary expression, that we need to neglect the economic value, by no means. But especially when we talk about European projects, when we talk about new ideas which could emerge into these European projects, that is the idea. New ways of creating value. And creating value that is not just remaining on the two aspects that currently are mostly discussed and also elaborated upon, mainly economic and environmental. Going beyond the social, going beyond the design even value of a future that we may co-create, co-design together. Interesting example of that, where we can find maybe interesting partners for a capacity building project. And that is the case of Ecuador in Latin America. They are the first country in 2008 who embedded in their constitution the protected rights of nature. And here you can see the 4 articles, 71, 72, 73, 74, that nature is really taken as though it would be alive and it would have a say in everything that is being constructed, built, or decided for. And how does it actually work in practice, in reality in Ecuador? Yes, they have a system, and that system is allowing, it is a sort of real democracy at hand, that everyone has a legal right to ask a court to enforce a constitutional right as the right of nature. So there are 3 groups currently acting upon the rights of nature, and these are, it started with the indigenous people, yes, true, but nowadays it is the environmentalists, the indigenous groups such as the campesinos, and also groups who are from rural areas, who are seeing the effect of us humans onto nature in terms of destruction. And what is also important is that in the recent years, so it's 2022 now, 14 years later since this happened in Ecuador, that in total 24 projects were stopped because of the well-being of nature, because it was really taken as a key player. One was a mining project, the other project was for a theme park, the third project was for a deforestation in a specific area. But before it started in Ecuador, it dates even back in time, where we can find other interesting partners, which could be coming from academia or coming from non-governmental organizations, such as the professor in American law, Christopher Stone, who laid the foundation for what later on could be referred to as rights of nature in his article, where he spoke of nobody else but Disney and the parks of Disneyland and their permits in one of the areas there in the United States, where again, although there was no constitutional right yet of nature, as it was the case in Ecuador, it was voted against having this park of Disney built into that sequoia, actually, specific forest. So what would be interesting for us to explore when it comes to new possible European project ideas, especially for partnerships or knowledge establishments or strategic other partnerships and formats, even mobilities? 3, although you may think a little bit of container words because everybody talks about them, yet differently, we can reframe them. And we can think about reimagining waste, next generation transport, innovative heavy industry. And at first you may look into these 3 and say, what's so innovative about those? And how do they link in total to all these 17 sustainable development goals and 169 targets that the European Union has set until 2030? And do not forget, we are in 2022, and we hardly have accomplished partially only 8 of these. Then these still become very relevant. Because waste is not only waste in the way we distribute and recycle waste. Waste is there a lot when we talk about information societies, when we talk about artificial intelligence, when we talk about robotics, when we talk about educational waste in general, when we talk about wasting value of human capital, because human capital is also key. So if you bring cross-disciplinary domains into one project, that is seen by the European Union as a unique buying reason, not selling opportunity or selling principle. Because the idea is what you give in rather than what you would be getting off. So it is not how we view it, but how they would read it when a project proposal is submitted. So these cross-disciplinary domains. When we think about next generation transport, we easily link it to crowd safety, to crowd management. That links on its own to events and to tourism industry. That links to the tourism community-based societies. That could be also a thing for exploration when tackling transport, when thinking about sustainability. When we talk about manufacturing and pharmaceutical industries, and we think about all these well-being economy, where the idea is, at the end of the day, of leisure not just being called free time, but being called what actually do we need to sustain value. You see now these experiments which are happening in Finland, and that is always a wonderful partner to have, of course, in almost any project, is thinking how do they look into these basic income contractual procedures, and what could they be for the different sectors we are working in. So why not exploring that when it comes to manufacturing and combining it with robotics and nature rights? And one important thing, if you would look next to many others, but a specific one when talking about the rights of nature into the sustainable development goals, is the one that I would like you to have a little bit at the back of your mind as well. And that is life on land versus gender equality. We are talking a lot in Europe about gender equality, about equality in income, about zero gender discrepancy in all countries. And the only country so far that we see it in Europe actually happening is Iceland. And Iceland has the first authority. They have a private organization, they have also an NGO, which deals exactly with the topic of life on land, where you know in Iceland what they refer to land, versus gender equality. So this could be also a very interesting cross-domain that can be explored in a project. When we talk about innovation and what kind of innovative practices there have already been and coming to nature. Here in the Netherlands, for example, it has been only the last 2 years that the topic of constitutional rights of nature have become a theme to be discussed into some of the media. And yet, there is only one project that has currently something to do with it, and it is not EU funded. It is national and regional funding based. So, talking about sustainable development goals, there were two container terms, if I may, please excuse me for this term, but they have become more of a container term. This is circular economy and sustainability. Circular economy in its essence does not mean anything else but that. To reduce material and energy use, as well as waste, through recycling, repairing, reusing, and thus combining again the two ones that I mentioned, economy and environment. So making sure everything would run on profit, whereby the environment is not neglected and also taken care of. If you would look deeply into that, you would see, and if you think from your own innovative perspective, because here I'm really talking to innovators, to people who are creating the future by means of projects. You are absolutely understanding and you have embedded it already in the projects that you are currently implementing. That is not sufficient. That is only innovation that is incremental, improving something. That's incremental innovation. If I decide to make out of a desk also a chair, I'm just improving the desk, nothing else. And that is what they try to host behind the term circular economy. And if we dig deeper even, here you see it very clearly. Raw materials that are coming from agriculture, energy, mining, quarrying, going to be processed and manufactured in the chemical industry, in the building and the construction and other manufacturing industries, distributed by the means of retail or transport, and then used and coming to the end of their life cycle. And what circular economy does is repair, reuse, remanufacture, recycle, and possibly slightly reduce. So the main idea here is to go outside of that and look into business models. So not only business models like the business model canvas or the social canvas model of where we incorporate beneficiaries and clients together, but look into these 9 domains that you're seeing on this slide. Complex products, home delivery, what happened to the delivery industry after the pandemic, right? If we would look into these specific 9, you may really think that in the development we are currently at, 21st century, 2022, we are actually as though we are in 2039 in terms of development of at least 4 of these 9 that you're seeing, just because of the pandemic. So imagine how many good practices are already existing to also explore by means of a project and see how in contexts where they are working, for example, complex products and blockchain technology into collaborative consumption and vice versa. Home delivery and delivery practices, we very well know what happened to Amazon and Jeff Bezos in the last 2 years, versus recycling because of the home delivery. Product lifespan and 3D printing and healthcare, and what kind of additive manufacturing can that be because of that technology. Modular design, Internet of Things. Some of them have a very wide span of how they can be further on reused and the circularity can be even increased. And some of them are really not so far capable as much as they do not open the borders of actually looking into these 9 as one. And this is where you have the mastery to do so in the forthcoming projects that you might be developing. Some good practices already, which might be interesting for you to also look into. El Salvador, first country that Bitcoin has been accepted as official currency. Also a country which houses an NGO partnered with the government to use more durable earthquake-resistant building technology in social housing. Also very hot topics. In Brazil, Procomposto, an SME startup providing waste collection and composting services to generators of organic waste in cities. Flat cars exported to Brazil containing polyurinase seed foams with 5% soy polyot. And that's very specific from an agricultural perspective, but basically saying that for the reuse and reproduction of soil, we just would need a little bit of polyurinates. And that is really a whole breakthrough when it comes to disruptive innovation and not just incremental. The Nigeria case of the tractor sharing, which might be, of course, community-based principles if you think about social entrepreneurship and social innovation, that is transformative. Because here we are talking about innovative principles, especially for the sustainable future generation, that can be having an impact, which is long-lasting and not short-term, which is tackling several generations to hopefully come rather than just the current and the next one. And there would be, at the first hand, you may think all these good practices would come mostly from Europe. But what is interesting is that you see all of them coming from countries that would not be on top of our list when thinking of good practices. And all of these countries also having a very favorable soil for a lot of projects to be explored and a lot of these organizations to be approached. And as promised to both Olena and Maya, next to these slides, I will also give a list of possible interesting organizations that you may directly connect to or explore as future partnerships or models for what they have used. The last thing that I wanted to mention, because I don't want to read out loud all of them as mentioned, of course, you will be able to fully that on your own, is really this idea of the Tanzanian government to look into smallholder farmers. So this here we are talking about, so far we are very well acquainted with the micro, small, medium-sized, big corporations, enterprises, etc., and all these categorization of the European Union. But here they talk about smallholder farms. And smallholder, again, it's a little bit similar to the single proprietors, yet differently, because of the value they generate and the capital distribution they may have. So why not also doing something with that idea and incorporating, of course, the ideas of nature's rights? Because as you also see, these new industrial development models, they talk about 4 aspects: shelter, housing, that nature is of course responsible in the case of humankind otherwise not being able to shelter itself, food, waste, and mobility. All of these ideas of these transitions that we are seeing not only by means of the refugees we are welcoming. Yes, that would be more or less a general overview, and I will be more than glad to answer some questions now and to have some discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Lily. It was really very, very interesting. So for me, I will have questions, but maybe after a few days when I
process the information more. Yes. Yes. Okay. All right.
Yes. Thank you. Really very, very interesting. Thanks.
Thank you. Lilia, thank you very much. I was just thinking, I mean, on coming back to the concept of interconnectivity. Only this morning, we were thinking about how to explain to the partners of one of the projects, which was approved, and we have to organize a kickoff meeting, what regeneration in general and regenerative tourism means. Then I just ask if I can take one of the slides with those icebergs, because I think it would be much more
very clear
to show it in this way.
Yes.
Very interesting, also very inspiring. I was thinking when you explain about reimagining waste.
Yeah.
Definitely. Usually when we talk about waste, we think about waste of materials, but definitely there is information waste, educational waste, and all of the roundabout topics. Thank you very much just to give us more light on these areas. Do we have any questions? Any comments? Yeah,
Yes,
Isabella.
if I could, thank you, Liliana. It was really inspiring, and it was really nice to listen to you because your voice was very soft, and it was really, I enjoyed this presentation very much, and I was very surprised because for the first time I'm here, and I am happy, but I have provocative question. Of course, I agree with previous mentioned things, that it was really interesting to hear about the waste in different understanding, waste of, as was said already, information and even human resources. But I want to ask you how we all who are working with such kind of social domain, in the social field with the peoples, and we want to reach the goals, all this 17 and plus 156 and more, how we can suggest, or how we can rethink about our own traveling, because as you all know, we have all meetings, different conferences, different partners meeting, and after these 2 years, I believe we all saw that we are able to work online. But now I believe that everybody is missed this 2 years of traveling, and everybody who must to use the partnership goals and resources,
they
they are
use them.
traveling.
Yeah, you're totally right. So yeah, if I understand correctly, first of all, thank you all for the kind words. And I'm very happy to have been able to provide this inspiration. And it is indeed to be viewed mostly as inspiration, because these are serious topics that would require whole years of explorations for us to get into the profoundness and the depth of those. So your question, I wish I had an answer. But the thing that I do believe is really important here to say, and it is also disturbing my thoughts, Zivile, is the following. We have learned a lot throughout the pandemic, and I am a certain believer into the effectiveness and efficiency of everything we can do online. I do miss a lot of that. I am a lecturer myself at the university, and I see the reluctance of people now going online. They really insist on the physical interaction and connection. There are two sides of that, being someone who comes from the social domain, yet an economist. One side is this human nature of physical, which longs and craves for physical bonding. And this is really something that we would never be able to avoid, because we are created to be going into tribes, clans, and creating communities. Creating an online community is always possible and will always be sustainable. But next to that, there has to be the hybridity possible of people to actually still be seeing one another. If I look into this screen today of the people that we are here, although some people I'm not seeing with their faces, I believe that we are coming from the age still that we were mostly physically encountering ourselves. But if I would talk about the students whom I have now, being 18 and 20 to 25 maximum, they are absolutely seeing virtual as well as real as one. They do not call it real and virtual, they call it one. And these would be the people that I have the hope have not that necessity of continuously traveling to just meet, but have different necessities. Next to that, still, we have plenty of renewable resources which we can use for transportation, but we still opt and choose for the easiest, not necessarily the cheapest, the easiest. And that is really something that I think a lot of awareness has to be risen, and a lot of edutainment, not just education, but entertainment, and in combination has to be infused. Because the moment you realize it's there, and the moment you have experimented and tried it out, we are afraid to experiment. That's what I'm also sometimes flabbergasted, and I think it has to become also a topic of many European projects, allowing ourselves to fail, to experiment and learn. We don't teach that our students. I do, and maybe 5 colleagues next to me. The rest measure exactly what you said, Zivile, key performance indicators. And that is until we do that. Of
Yes.
course, everybody wants to pass and not fail. Yeah.
Exactly. And European Commission and national agencies, they are looking to the indicators, okay, plus, but maybe it could be, for example, such meetings, a discussion, an option to think and maybe to create something like, a suggestion for national agencies or even for European Commission that it should come a tradition or a good practice is just to travel only with in sustainable way, or otherwise it will not be granted from the our common
budget.
budget.
Yes. At the end of the day, it is common
because
budget.
it's just a bit paradox when we are all talking about sustainability in one hand, and then at the another hand we all coming with the airplanes, for example, G20 or in our transnational project meeting. So it's
especially the G20.
Totally paradox in sight, and of course it's nonsense. So maybe it could be a floor, an idea for us later to discuss, and maybe it could become
yes.
Yeah, it could become a suggestion for all of us to write a common resolution proposal, and then we can find, or we can do even the survey and invite our organizations to express this opinion and then to suggest, because I believe that each of us responsible
to contribute
to create,
if I may
to do
only
something.
Shortly interrupt you, Zivile, excuse me for that, but I would like to say something which I'm also a believer of, and I might not be right, but that's a personal opinion. The moment you make something compulsory, people resist. And I'm afraid that if we would file such a resolution, or you as an organization, I mean, then this is again a controversy versus what is so far existing. So the other extreme, you either use this and then you're called sustainable, or you do not use that and you're called really efficient economically. So, and I'm afraid that this is not the way to look into, because this will again make some people do the opposite just because they want to rebel. And that is also human nature to react in that way. So I think what has to happen, and I agree with you on the surveys, but I agree on something that is called co-creation and is only used as window dressing. I believe that somewhere there has to start really a dialogue. And in that dialogue to create new social constructs. And by a social construct, I mean new meaning to what transportation means. And then we can start shaping different realities. Otherwise, we will be falling again into the same trap of what we say is good and what is bad. And this we as also humans have the responsibility to not do again.
Yeah, Lilia, I totally agree with you. I mean, we need to think about co-design, co-creation as one of the way, which is not something compulsory, but voluntary, that we can use, I mean, to do something different, to make changes and to create the system. I mean, I don't know if it will be system or anti-system, but it will be something new where all of us feel, I mean, as at home. Well, thank you very much. Do we have any more questions? Yeah, we have a couple of minutes if you want to say something, if you want to ask Lilia. Well, in any case, can you give us a promise later to share the presentation with the members?
And the list of the organizations. Yes.
Okay. I will stop now.